Hey Van Heis! Welcome to week number 4 of virtual learning. Now last week, in Mr. Lynch's online art class, we talked about capturing textures, and more specifically, textures of plants. And today we're going to be creating a new type of texture, something a little bit more fuzzy, and we're going to be using fibers for this project. And when I say fibers, I mean anything that's made up of stringy material, like yarn, or cloth, or even plants have fibers. You look at this this big kind of blade of grass or big leaf that I picked last week. You can see that I can sort of start peeling it apart, and it has these kind of stringy bits on the inside. So plants have fibers too. Today we're going to be making miniature pom-poms, these tiny little fuzz balls. They're pretty simple to make, and they're a lot of fun, and you can do a whole lot of things with them. So, for this project, we're going to need just a few simple materials. You're going to need some kind of string or yarn. Even something like a shoelace could work for this. We're going to need a scissors to help us cut the fibers. And we're going to need a fork. Let's get started. Okay, here I have all my materials to make one of these tiny little pom-poms. And what I'm going to start with is my fork and my yarn. So I'm going to clear my space, and I think I'm going to use this nice bluish, greenish, whitish yarn. And I'm going to be wrapping yarn around the tongs of my fork. So make sure I've got some yarn in my hand, and I'm going to have my fork at the ready just like this, and I'm going to hold on to one end of this yarn with a thumb, and I'm going to start to wrap the yarn around the tongs of my fork. And I want to wrap them so they're staying together in a little cluster right in the middle. Not too close to the top and not too close to the bottom, because we're going to need to have some space to wrap them all up. Okay, so now I've got my little cluster of yarn wrapped around my fork. I'm going to snip the end just like this. Make sure those two ends are not unraveling. Then I'm going to cut an extra piece of yarn. And this one I want to be maybe a little bit longer than my whole hand. Something kind of like this. I'm going to take this extra piece of yarn, and I'm going to start to feed it into this space right here, in between those two middle tongs. I'm going to try to slide it right between those two tongs, just like that. So it's almost like threading a needle. Then I'm going to bring that extra string, without sliding it all the way out, up and over my yarn cluster, like so. And we are going to use this string to tie this whole cluster up really nice and tight. So the knot I'm going to use is that same knot that you use when you're about to tie your shoes. And if you need to ask someone for help with this, no problem. Tie my knot and pull super tight, 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 tight. And you can see we almost have like a tiny little bow tie going on here. I'm going to do one. I'm going to do 2, and just for good measure, I'm also going to do a third knot, because we want to keep everything together. Okay, so we've got our little bow tie. It's time now to slide it off of our fork. This is the fun part. Shink. Came off real easy. Now, it's time to get out your scissors. First thing I'm going to do is cut off these extra bits of that yarn that we used to tie it all up. Now I'm going to start just using the very, very tip of my scissors. I'm going to start to snip the edges of my cluster of yarn, and that's what's going to give us those little hairs to make it look like a pom-pom, just like this. Okay, now you can see at this point there's still a little bit of our that yarn that we used to tie it all up visible, we want to give this pom-pom a little bit of a haircut because we want it to be more sphere shaped or more ball shaped. And right now it's kind of like a little monster. So I'm going to take some time and just do a little trimming, a little haircut. And there you have it, your very own teeny tiny little yarn pom-pom. There's lots of different things we could do. So here's just a few examples of what we can do now that our mini pom-pom is complete. Thanks so much for watching. I can't wait to see what you guys end up coming up with at home with your very own miniature yarn pom-poms. Check back next week for another exciting art lesson. Have a great week, Van Heis.